Alright YouTube, we're back talking some FF7 Remake Part 3, but also potentially Kingdom Hearts 4. So what we have is, there was a Reddit AMA from a few days ago. Specifically, it was actually in the AMA subreddit, Ask Me Anything subreddit. And there's a person who's claiming to be a playtester for a large-scale AAA action RPG. Now, that by itself is quite vague, right? That could be a lot of different games, but it's within like the questions and answers that they give that it kind of leans in favor of something potentially Square Enix, because that seems to be a majority of what they playtest. We'll read the actual post really quickly. I'm a playtest coordinator for a large-scale AAA action RPG currently in development. Ask me anything. Hey everyone, I'm a playtest coordinator working on a big AAA title. My job is to set up and manage playtests, scheduling players, collecting feedback, watching how people interact with the game, and then passing all that insight to the dev team. At the same time, I have a split role whereby I'm also actively involved in the QA testing, finding bugs, glitches, etc. Because of NDAs, I can't talk about the specific game I'm working on, obviously. No story leaks, no gameplay spoilers, sorry, but I can share what the role is like, how playtests actually run behind the scenes, what skills are useful if you want to get into the industry, and what it's like helping shape games before release. I actually made this Reddit account just for this AMA, so feel free to ask me anything about the job, process, or industry side of playtesting. I will answer what I can. P.S. English is not my first language, so apologies if some of my answers aren't written perfectly. I'll do my best to keep it clear. The last bit's the only thing that stands out somewhat weird to me, because it's something we've seen in the past when we look at like leaks for whatever game we might be talking about, where somebody has like inside information. They also throw in, oh, by the way, English is not my first language. And then everything about what they say is perfect English. So it's like, what's even the point? Like, even if like English is not your primary language, this person can clearly speak it perfectly. So like, what's even the point in saying that? I mean, it makes sense if English is not their first language, because if they're playtesting for stuff like FF7 or, Kingdom Hearts 4 or other like foreign games, they're probably from Japan or something, right? So it makes sense that their first language would be Japanese. But again, this person speaks English perfectly. So hopping right into it, this person says, what games have you worked on in the past? They say, I've worked on several Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts entries, The World Ends With You, Dark Souls. In recent years, I was also heavily involved with several remasters of past games. I was also fortunate enough to assist on a few Pokemon games, but I wasn't with the developer long as I didn't enjoy the environment much, so I ended up returning back to the current company I work for. So that's the most kind of important information to get to first, assuming that this person is actually a playtester, is that they have a history of working on the Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts entries, plural, multiple. I don't know if they've worked on multiple The World Ends With You games, or multiple Dark Souls, because they specify, several entries for Final Fantasy Kingdom Hearts, and then they like comma into, The World Ends With You and Dark Souls. So I don't know if they mean Dark Souls 1 specifically, or like multiple Dark Souls games, whatever. The main point here is that this person has worked on multiple Square Enix games, right? Final Fantasy Kingdom Hearts, The World Ends With You, right? And when it comes to Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, it's been several entries. They also specify in a follow-up question that they really enjoyed working on Remake and 16, and also Melody of Memory when it comes to the Kingdom Hearts series. Another thing I'm kind of unsure of here is when they say they worked on Remake, if they mean specifically Final Fantasy VII Remake itself, or the Remake project, as in Remake and also Rebirth, I guess potentially Part 3. Again, kind of like a baseline here, this person has a history of playtesting for the Remake games, at the very least, at least the first game. This person asks, how long have you been playtesting this title, and can playtesting be done outside of the main development offices remotely? Example, if a game was being developed in Osaka, but you reside in Tokyo, can you playtest it from there? I can't say how long I've been playtesting this title, as it may give it away, but it has been a while. Playtesting can only be done physically in person at site, due to the company wanting to avoid possible leaks. From memory, there's only been one session which was split between two offices, but this is because two completely different aspects of the game were being tested. Everything else has been on site at HQ. It's part where they specify that you have to playtest in person at site, at the development studio, at HQ, whatever, right? Because somebody does ask them where they're playtesting at. So this person asks, where are you working on the game? Europe, North America, and they say Tokyo. So that certainly narrows it down a bit, right? To Tokyo, Japan, that's where the studio is that they're playtesting at, since they have to playtest in person, right? That narrows it down slightly. There's still a lot of games that could be, a lot of studios that could be, right? But if we're looking at Square Enix and we're looking at, Kingdom Hearts 4 and we're looking at Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, Kingdom Hearts 4 is being made by CBU 1, but it is specifically being made in Osaka, by the same team that made Kingdom Hearts 3. And of course, the remake games are being developed by CBU 1 in Tokyo. Now, if we're having the conversation of what large-scale AAA action RPG this might be from Square Enix, and the conversation is, Kingdom Hearts 4 or Remake Part 3, it has to be Part 3, because, again, Kingdom Hearts 4 is in Osaka. It's possible it could be a different AAA action RPG from Square Enix. It could be, Final Fantasy 17 or something else entirely, or it could be, from a completely different studio. They have a history of working with FromSoft and Dark Souls. Obviously, FromSoft is located in Tokyo as well. It could be something else entirely. It could not be related to, FromSoft or Square Enix. It could be a different company. Who knows? We're obviously trying to have the conversation from the perspective of something from Square Enix. I think it's also worth mentioning that they did say they like to work on Melody of Memory, but also they worked on Remake, potentially the Remake franchise, but at least the first Remake game, which was also CBU1, right? So they do have a history of working with this specific Square Enix team. Somebody does actually specifically ask them. They say, Tokyo, holy shit, are you working on Kingdom Hearts 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3? And they obviously say, I can't answer this, I'm afraid. I'm not allowed to dive into anything game specific. Actually, I suppose that's another part I find a little bit weird, is that they did specify where they're playtesting at. Obviously, Tokyo is very vague, and they name multiple companies they've worked for, games they've worked for, that are located in, Tokyo, Japan, right? So them saying Tokyo is not exactly specific, but also like, why would you even say that if you're trying to be as vague as possible, right? To avoid NDAs. Unless the NDA doesn't say anything about location. Maybe you can talk about where you're playtesting at as long as you don't specify what game it is or something. I don't know. I've never done this shit before. So this person also says, okay, you can't give any game specifics away. So answer this then. Does your game involve spiky-haired characters? And they say, in general, I think nearly every action RPG has characters with spiked hair. Which is obviously very true, right? With like most RPGs, probably the main protagonist generally, or like action RPGs, there's usually going to be spiked hair. It's just kind of a cool look for characters. But obviously with, Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, spiky hair. But them saying that is kind of like a roundabout way of them confirming that whatever game they're playing, the characters have spiky hair. And I will say, when that comes to FromSoft games, that's not necessarily true because you create your own character, right? And they probably have spiky hair options, but it's a character you create. It's not a default character with spiky hair, right? So if we want to look too much into what they're saying and them alluding to spiky hair, that might lean more in favor of Kingdom Hearts and or Final Fantasy. They do also clarify, too, that when it comes to the kind of testing that they do, it's never like towards like the end of the game's development cycle or the beginning specifically. It's all of it. It's even, there's testing being done after the game comes out as well. So as exciting as it is to talk about the prospects of, there being playtesting being done for either a Kingdom Hearts 4 or a Remake Part 3, it doesn't really tell us anything because it doesn't, tell us that the game's any further along than we maybe already think they might be. When it comes to something like Kingdom Hearts 4, that game's been in development for a fucking long time. But there's no telling when the game's coming out, right? And there's a lot of things that go into that, and it's usually Disney, right? In terms of like them like licensing shit and wanting things to be what they want, specifically with Kingdom Hearts. And when it comes to like, Remake Part 3, we know the game's kind of on like a schedule. There's like a time frame it's coming out for sure. Like it's coming out like 2028 at the absolute fucking latest. We're all expecting like 2027, right? But at the absolute latest it'd be like 2028. Like we have a definite time frame when that game's coming out, barring any sort of insane delays. Kingdom Hearts 4, like with the way that franchise is handled, it's just hard to know. Like I assume it's decently far along. We've seen good gameplay back in the day. We've seen some recent screenshots showing us some cool shit. But there's no telling how long we gotta wait for Kingdom Hearts 4. But when it comes to FF7 Remake Part 3, we know we're getting the marketing soon. Maybe it won't be this year, which would really fucking suck, but like 100% definite, guarantee, no way it's not happening. We're getting shit for Part 3 next year, like 2026 at the latest, right? Probably this year, most likely, but 2026 for sure, like latest. We also did have this comment from them where they said that the project that they're currently involved in, they've been with for several years. This is another aspect of this that's kind of vague just because it depends on what they mean by several, what they consider to be several years, right? Because if you look at like Kingdom Hearts 4, that's obviously been being made for quite a long time. It definitely qualifies for several years. If you look at something like Remake Part 3, it's a little debatable because, it'll be, I think, full development for a year. I think like this November. I think last November is when they told us they like entered full development. But they've also been working on the third game since even before Rebirth itself came out, right? And probably a decent amount of time before then if you consider like the planning, stages and stuff like that. So it kind of depends on what this person means by several. I did also want to highlight this comment again where they talk about how they did do some testing that was split between two offices, and that's because they're testing two completely different aspects of the game. It's obviously quite vague, as is pretty much all of this, right? And when it comes to like testing different aspects of a video game, that could be 1,000 different things. But I will say, when reading through this and thinking about Part 3, like I immediately went to the Highwind, just because that's like a completely different aspect to like anything we've seen so far in like Remake and Rebirth, right? So having to playtest the game over in like one office, like actual like general combat, maybe general exploration on foot and stuff. Maybe having to go to a completely different location to test like the Highwind, because it's something they're going to have to test heavily to get it right. Really kind of it for the video. Ultimately, it's just, somebody that, claims to playtest games doing an AMA on Reddit. Could it be for Part 3? Could it be for Kingdom Hearts? Maybe. We can narrow it down to Tokyo, Japan, according to them. It's a, large-scale AAA action RPG. They have a history of working with Square Enix on Square Enix games, Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, stuff like that, right? It could be something else entirely, but like a lot of evidence does point towards that. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter because, again, you do like bug testing and play testing through all stages of development, so it doesn't really tell us anything. It's still kind of exciting to talk about them, potentially doing playtesting stuff for Part 3 right now. So what is the point of this video? I have no idea. I just want to cover this, talk about this. I seen the Gamers Joint cover it earlier today. I thought it was kind of interesting. He talked about it more from the aspect of it potentially being Kingdom Hearts stuff. I want to talk about it from the perspective of it potentially being FF7 Remake Part 3. But my dudes, that is the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social links in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, ffvii. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.